Hey there, and welcome to Crazy Pepper, the channel where drama sizzles and revenge burns hotter than ever. If you love jaw dropping twists, bold characters, and stories that keep you guessing till the end, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into gripping tales of betrayal, karma, and ultimate payback. Get ready for unforgettable moments and satisfying endings, only on Crazy Pepper. Hit that bell and let the drama begin. In my experience, nothing good ever starts with a Tupperware container full of homemade cookies from your mother-in-law. Especially when she's standing on your doorstep at 7 in the morning, wearing that smile that could freeze hell over. "Good morning, Daniel," Patricia chirped, holding out the blue container like it contained the crown jewels. "I made Lily's favorites, chocolate chip with my special ingredient." My wife Melissa practically bounced down the stairs, still in her bathrobe. "Oh, Mom, you didn't have to." But her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. At 36, Melissa still turned into a 12-year-old whenever her mother showed up with baked goods. "It's tradition," Patricia said, and something about the way she emphasized that word made my skin crawl. Every grandmother has her special recipe. Mine's been in the family for generations. I stood there in my scrubs, coffee mug in hand, watching this domestic theater play out. Patricia was 62, silver-haired, and had the kind of gentle grandmother appearance that belonged on a greeting card. The kind of woman who volunteered at church bake sales and knitted scarves for homeless shelters. The kind of woman who made me inexplicably nervous. "Daniel, you can take these to work," Melissa said, pressing the container into my hands. "Give them to Lily when you pick her up from school. She loves having Grandma's cookies for her after-school snack." The plastic felt warm against my palms. Through the translucent lid, I could see perfectly round cookies, golden brown with dark chocolate chips scattered across their surfaces. They looked innocent enough. They smelled like vanilla and butter and childhood memories. "That's very thoughtful, Patricia," I managed, though something in my gut was sending up warning flares. Maybe it was the way she watched me hold the container, like she was memorizing the moment. Maybe it was how Lily always seemed to get stomach aches after visiting Grandma's house. "Anything for my granddaughter," Patricia said, reaching out to pat my cheek with one cool, papery hand. "Family takes care of family, doesn't it, Daniel?" After she left, Melissa hummed while she got ready for work. She was a marketing manager at a tech startup downtown, the kind of job that required her to be perpetually optimistic about everything. Even her mother's surprise visits. "Isn't she sweet?" Melissa called from the bathroom. "I swear, Mom lives to spoil Lily." I didn't answer. I was too busy staring at the cookie container, trying to figure out why it felt like I was holding a ticking bomb. 20 minutes later, I was driving to St. Mary's Hospital, where I'd worked as a pharmacy technician for the past 8 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well and kept regular hours. Most importantly, it let me pick up my 6-year-old daughter from school every day at 3:30. The morning flew by in its usual rhythm of prescription fills, insurance calls, and medication verifications. I'd almost forgotten about the cookies until lunch break, when I carried the container into the break room and set it on the small table by the microwave. My colleague Jake Martinez was heating up leftover pizza. "Homemade cookies? Your mother-in-law again?" "The one and only," I said, popping the lid. The sweet smell wafted out, stronger now. "Help yourself." Jake reached for one, then stopped. He leaned closer to the container, his nose wrinkling. As the hospital's lead pharmacist, Jake had an almost supernatural ability to identify compounds by smell. It was a running joke among the staff. "Daniel," he said slowly, "where exactly did these come from?" "Patricia made them." "Why?" Jake picked up one of the cookies and held it close to his face. His expression changed from casual interest to something approaching alarm. "These aren't just cookies." "What do you mean?" "I mean, there's something else in here, something that doesn't belong." He set the cookie down like it might explode. "We need to call the police." My blood turned to ice water. "Jake, what are you talking about?" "Sodium azide," he said, already reaching for his phone. "I can smell it. It's faint, but it's there. Industrial poison, Daniel. These cookies are laced with industrial poison." The break room seemed to tilt sideways. "That's impossible. Patricia made these for Lily. She's her grandmother." Jake was already dialing 911. "Take your daughter to the hospital right now," he said, then spoke into the phone. "This is Jake Martinez at St. Mary's Hospital Pharmacy. I need to report a poisoning attempt. We have cookies laced with sodium azide." I don't remember running to my car. I don't remember the drive to Lily's elementary school, though I must have broken every speed limit in the city. All I remember is the taste of copper in my mouth and the single thought hammering through my skull. Lily ate one of Patricia's cookies yesterday, just one, at Grandma's house. I burst through the doors of Riverside Elementary like a man possessed. The secretary, Mrs. Henderson, looked up from her computer with alarm. "Mr. Thompson, is everything—" "I need Lily. Now." My voice came out as a croak. "There's been an emergency. Of course, let me call her classroom. No time." I was already moving toward the hallway. "Room 12, right?" Mrs. Henderson hurried after me, her heels clicking on the polished floor. "Sir, we have procedures." I found Lily's classroom and knocked hard enough to rattle the door. Miss Garcia opened it, took one look at my face, and stepped aside. "Daddy!" Lily bounced up from her desk, her blonde pigtails flying. She looked perfect, healthy, normal. But I knew that sodium azide poisoning could be insidious, building up in the system before showing symptoms. "We need to go, sweetheart," I said, scooping her into my arms. "Right now." "But we're doing our time. We'll do our later. I promise." The drive to St. Mary's emergency room was the longest 15 minutes of my life. Lily chattered in the back seat about her day, completely oblivious to the panic clawing at my chest. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, looking for signs of distress. Pale skin, difficulty breathing, nausea. She looked fine. She looked like a normal 6-year-old who'd been interrupted during art time. But I knew that meant nothing. Jake met us at the ER entrance with Dr. Sarah Chen, the head of emergency medicine. They whisked Lily away for blood work while I paced the waiting room like a caged animal. "Mr. Thompson?" Dr. Chen appeared beside me 45 minutes later. "We need to talk." My knees nearly buckled. "How bad?" "She's going to be okay," Dr. Chen said quickly, and the relief almost knocked me flat. "But your colleague was right. Lily has sodium azide in her system. Not enough to be immediately life-threatening, but we're starting chelation therapy immediately." "How much?" My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Based on her blood levels, probably 1 cookie's worth, maybe 2. Dr. Chen's expression was grim. "Mr. Thompson, if she'd eaten 3 or 4 of those cookies, we'd be having a very different conversation." I sank into one of the plastic waiting room chairs. "She ate one yesterday at her grandmother's house. Just one. That saved her life." The next few hours passed in a blur of medical procedures and police interviews. Detective Amanda Foster arrived around 6 p.m., a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who took notes in a small leather notebook. "Tell me about your mother-in-law," she said. "Patricia Williams. She's 62, retired elementary school teacher. Lives alone in the Victorian house on Maple Street." I rubbed my eyes, exhausted. "She bakes for Lily all the time, has for years." "Any history of mental illness, depression, anxiety?" "Not that I know of. Melissa would know better." I paused. "She's my wife, Lily's mother. She's at her mother's house right now." Detective Foster looked up from her notebook. "She's where?" "I called her when we got to the hospital. Told her what happened. She didn't believe me. Said I was being paranoid. She took Lily's overnight bag and went to her mother's house." "Mr. Thompson, we need to get your daughter away from Patricia Williams immediately." My phone buzzed. Text message from Melissa. "Mom is devastated. She would never hurt Lily. You're destroying our family with these accusations. We're staying here tonight." I showed the message to Detective Foster. She immediately radioed for backup. "We're going to Patricia's house," she said. "Right now." Patricia's Victorian house squatted on Maple Street like something out of a Gothic novel. 3 stories of weathered gray shingles, wraparound porch, and windows that seemed to watch you as you approached. I'd always hated that house. Detective Foster parked across the street. 2 patrol cars pulled up behind us, but she motioned for the officers to stay back. "Let me try talking to them first," she said. We walked up the front steps together. The porch was lined with ceramic planters full of dead flowers. Patricia had always been meticulous about her garden, but this year, everything seemed to have withered. Detective Foster knocked. "Mrs. Williams, this is Detective Harada with the police department. We need to speak with you." The door opened, and Patricia appeared, wearing a pale blue cardigan and that same serene smile. "Detective, is there some kind of problem?" We need to talk about the cookies you gave to your granddaughter. Cookies? Patricia's eyes widened with what looked like genuine confusion. I don't understand. Mom, don't say anything. Melissa appeared behind her, holding Lily's hand. My daughter looked tired but alert. Healthy. Daniel is trying to frame you for something you didn't do. Melissa, I said, stepping forward, please, just bring Lily out here. So you can fill her head with lies about her grandmother? Detective Foster held up a hand. Mrs. Williams, we've had the cookies tested. They contain sodium azide. That's a dangerous poison. Patricia's face crumpled. Oh my goodness. That's terrible. Where could that have come from? That's what we're trying to figure out, Detective Foster said gently. Can you walk me through how you made them? Of course, I used my grandmother's recipe. Flour, sugar, butter, eggs, chocolate chips. The same recipe I've used for 30 years. What about the special ingredient you mentioned to Daniel this morning? Patricia looked genuinely puzzled. Special ingredient? I just meant love, Detective. I always tell people, the secret ingredient is love. I watched this performance with growing amazement. If I hadn't seen Jake's reaction to those cookies, if I hadn't watched the blood drain from Dr. Chen's face when she delivered Lily's test results, I might have believed her myself. Mrs. Williams, Detective Foster said, we're going to need you to come to the station for some additional questions. Am I under arrest? Not at this time, but we do need to continue this conversation. Melissa stepped protectively in front of her mother. This is harassment. Daniel has poisoned you against an innocent woman. Melissa, please, I said. Look at the facts. The facts are that you've hated my mother since the day we got married. You've been looking for an excuse to turn me against her, and now you've found one. Detective Foster's radio crackled. She stepped aside to answer it, spoke in low tones for a moment, then returned with a changed expression. Mrs. Williams, I need to ask you about your previous grandchildren. The color drained from Patricia's face. My previous grandchildren? From your first marriage. 3 children. All died young. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Patricia's serene mask slipped just slightly, revealing something cold underneath. Those were tragedies, she said quietly. Accidents, illnesses, every grandmother's worst nightmare. We're going to need to examine those cases, Detective Foster said. Starting with exhumation orders, Patricia's smile never wavered, but something in her eyes changed, something that made me step instinctively closer to my daughter. Of course, she said. I want the truth to come out as much as anyone. But I didn't believe her. Not for a second. The exhumation took place on a gray Tuesday morning that felt like the world's most depressing movie set. I stood with Detective Foster and Jake Martinez at the edge of Riverside Cemetery, watching the backhoe carefully unearth 3 small graves. Patricia's first grandchild, Emma, had died at age 4 in 1998. Sudden illness, they'd said. Poor little thing just couldn't keep anything down. The second, Michael, had passed at age 5 in 2003. Another mysterious illness. Stomach problems that the doctors couldn't quite diagnose. The third, Sarah, had been 6 when she died in 2008. Same pattern, same mysterious symptoms. All within the age range when kids start developing their own opinions, Jake observed grimly. When they stop being compliant little dolls. Dr. Chen supervised the removal of tissue samples from each small body. The process was clinical, respectful, but it still made my stomach turn. These had been children. Someone's babies. Patricia's babies. Preliminary results will take 48 hours, Dr. Chen told us. But if your theory is correct, we should find sodium azide in all 3. I thought about Lily, safe at my sister's house across town. Melissa had finally agreed to let her stay there after Detective Foster explained the seriousness of the investigation. She still didn't believe her mother was capable of homicide, but she wasn't taking any chances with Lily's safety. Patricia, meanwhile, was staying at the Riverside Inn under police surveillance. Not arrested, but not free to leave town either. Daniel, Detective Foster said as we walked back to our cars, I need you to think carefully. Has Patricia ever mentioned her own childhood? Her siblings? Not really. Melissa might know more. Because I did some digging into Patricia's family history. She had 2 younger brothers. Both died in childhood, in the 90s. I stopped walking. How? Mysterious illnesses. Same pattern. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You think this goes back generations? I think Patricia learned this behavior from someone, probably her own mother, and I think she's been perfecting it for 60 years. That evening, I sat in my empty house, trying to process everything. Melissa was staying at her friend Taylor's apartment, still convinced that I was somehow orchestrating an elaborate frame-up of her mother. We'd spoken on the phone twice, both conversations ending in shouting matches. "You're destroying our family," she'd said during the last call. "Even if Mom is cleared of all charges, how do we come back from this? How do I trust you again?" I'd wanted to ask her the same question. How do you trust someone who chooses a potential child butcher over their own husband? How do you forgive someone who puts their mother's feelings above their daughter's safety? My phone rang. Detective Foster. "Daniel, we got the preliminary results back. All three children had sodium azide in their systems. Significant levels." I closed my eyes. "So it's true. It gets worse. I found Patricia's mother's death certificate. She died in 1990. Guess what the cause of passing was? Sodium azide poisoning? Bingo! Listed as accidental exposure to industrial cleaner. But now I'm wondering if Patricia decided it was time for Mom to retire. The scope of it was staggering. A family tradition of homicide, passed down like a recipe. How many children had died over the decades? How many grieving families had never known the truth? "We're arresting Patricia tomorrow morning," Detective Foster said. "I wanted you to know before it hits the news." After she hung up, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my living room, staring at family photos. Pictures of Lily's birthday parties, Christmas mornings, summer vacations. In half of them, Patricia was there, smiling her grandmother's smile, holding my daughter close. How many of those moments had been her sizing up her next sufferer? How many times had I handed my child over to a serial butcher? Patricia's arrest made the front page of the Riverside Gazette. Local grandmother charged, and multiple child ends. The story was picked up by the state news, then national outlets. By Thursday morning, news vans lined Maple Street like metallic vultures. I was getting ready for work when my phone exploded with calls. First Jake, then Detective Foster, then my sister Karen. "Daniel, turn on Channel 7, Karen said, her voice tight with panic. I grabbed the remote and flipped to the local news. A reporter stood in front of Patricia's house, speaking urgently into her microphone. The situation began approximately 30 minutes ago when Patricia Williams, recently charged with multiple counts of homicide, barricaded herself inside her home with 2 hostages. Police confirmed that the hostages are her daughter, Melissa Thompson, and 6-year-old granddaughter, Lily Thompson." The remote slipped from my numb fingers. "Daniel?" Karen's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Daniel, are you there?" I was already moving, grabbing my keys, running for the door. The drive to Maple Street took forever and no time at all. Police cars blocked both ends of the street. SWAT vehicles, ambulances. A command center set up in someone's front yard. Detective Foster spotted me trying to push through the perimeter tape. "Daniel, you can't be here. That's my daughter in there. I know, we're going to get her out." "How did this happen?" "Melissa was supposed to be at Taylor's apartment. She came to see her mother this morning, brought Lily with her. Patricia must have been planning this." Through the chaos of police activity, I could see Patricia's house. The curtains were drawn, no movement visible. It looked like any other house on any other morning, except for the small army of law enforcement surrounding it. "Has she made any demands?" I asked. "She wants you to confess." "Confess to what?" "Framing her. She says she'll release Melissa and Lily when you publicly admit to planting the sodium azide in her cookies." I stared at Detective Foster. "She's insane." "Yes, but she's insane with 2 hostages, one of them a 6-year-old child." A SWAT commander approached us. "We've got eyes on the kitchen through the back window. Patricia's at the table with the little girl. Making tea, it looks like." My blood turned to ice. "Tea?" "She's not going to hurt Lily," Detective Foster said quickly. "She needs her as leverage." But I knew better. I'd seen the pattern. Patricia didn't see children as leverage. She saw them as problems to be solved. And she'd been solving them the same way for 60 years. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll confess to whatever she wants." "Daniel, set up the cameras. I'll say I planted the poison. I'll say whatever she needs to hear." The SWAT commander shook his head. "That won't work. She's not thinking rationally. Even if you confess, there's no guarantee she'll release the hostages." "Then what do you suggest?" "We wait. Try to establish communication. Look for an opportunity." But waiting felt impossible when my daughter was inside with a woman who'd eliminated at least 6 children over the course of 6 decades. A woman who saw homicide as a family tradition. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Daniel, this is Melissa. I'm using Mom's phone. She says she wants to talk to you. She's going to call in 5 minutes. Please don't let them trace this call. Please just listen to what she has to say. I showed the message to Detective Foster. She immediately called for the tech team to set up a trace. When she calls, Detective Foster said, keep her talking as long as possible. We need time to get a fix on her location inside the house. I thought you already had eyes on her. The kitchen, yes, but the house has 3 floors and a basement. If she moves, we need to know where. My phone rang. Patricia's number. Hello, Daniel. Her voice was calm, almost cheerful, like she was calling to chat about the weather. Patricia, are Melissa and Lily okay? They're fine, dear. We're just having a little tea party. Lily loves tea parties, don't you, sweetheart? I heard my daughter's voice in the background, small and scared. Daddy, I want to come home. Soon, baby, I called out, hoping she could hear me. Daddy's going to bring you home soon. Now, Daniel, Patricia continued, we need to clear up this misunderstanding. You've told some very hurtful lies about me. I just want my family safe. Of course you do. That's why you're going to tell everyone the truth. You're going to admit that you put that nasty poison in my cookies because you never liked me. Because you wanted to turn my daughter against me. Around me, the police tech team worked frantically with their equipment. Detective Foster made hand signals indicating they needed more time. Patricia, I said, why don't you tell me about your grandmother's recipe, the real recipe? There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice had changed and become softer, more distant. Grandmother was very wise, she said. She understood that some children are difficult, willful. She taught me that sometimes you have to make hard choices for the good of the family. What kind of hard choices? Grandmother's special ingredient, just a pinch. It makes the pain go away. Detective Foster was writing frantically on a notepad. Keep her talking about the grandmother. How old were you when she taught you? 12. My little brother Tommy was being so difficult, crying all the time, making messes. Grandmother said he needed to rest, permanent rest. The casual way she said it made my skin crawl. A 12-year-old girl, learning to homicide from her grandmother, learning that eliminating children was just another household chore. And you've been using her recipe ever since? When necessary. Children can be such a burden, Daniel. Surely you understand that. No, I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. I don't understand that at all. Well, perhaps you will. After Lily has her tea. The line went dead. She's going to eliminate her, I said to Detective Foster. She's going to eliminate my daughter. We won't let that happen. But I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. The SWAT team was good, but Patricia had chosen her ground well. The Victorian house was a maze of rooms and staircases, multiple entry points, multiple places to hide. And she had 2 hostages, one of them a 6-year-old child. Sir? One of the tech officers approached Detective Foster. We've got movement. Kitchen to front parlor. All 3 subjects. Through my binoculars, I could see shadows moving behind the sheer curtains of the front window. Patricia's silhouette, tall and thin, Melissa's shorter form. And between them, heartbreakingly small, Lily. Can your snipers get a clean shot? Detective Foster asked the SWAT commander. Negative, too much risk to the hostages. My phone rang again. Patricia. Daniel, I want you to come to the front porch. Alone. Patricia, don't argue with me, dear. Come to the front porch, or Lily gets her special tea right now. Detective Foster was shaking her head violently, but I was already moving toward the house. Daniel, stop, she called. You'll just be giving her another hostage. But I couldn't stop. Every instinct I had as a father was screaming at me to get to my daughter. Logic, tactics, police procedure, none of that mattered when your child was in danger. I walked up the front steps of Patricia's house for what I hoped wouldn't be the last time. The porch creaked under my feet. Through the front window, I could see into the parlor. Patricia sat in a high-backed chair holding a delicate china teacup. Melissa was on the sofa, her face streaked with tears. Lily sat beside her, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Patricia opened the front door but didn't invite me in. That's close enough, she said. I want you to call those reporters over, all of them. I want cameras. Why? Because you're going to confess on live television. You're going to tell everyone that you have framed an innocent grandmother because of your own jealousy and hatred." Behind her, I could see Melissa watching us. For the first time since this nightmare began, she looked like she was starting to understand. Her mother wasn't the sufferer here. Her mother was the monster. "And if I confess?" "Then maybe Lily doesn't have to drink her tea. Let me see her. Let me see that she's okay." Patricia smiled that grandmother smile and stepped aside. Lily was pale but alert. She saw me through the doorway and started to stand up. "Daddy!" "I'm here, baby. Daddy's here." "I want to go home," Lily said, and the simple honesty of it broke my heart. "Soon," I promised. "Very soon." Patricia closed the door again. "The reporters, Daniel. Call them now." I looked back at the street full of news vans and police cars, at Detective Foster, who was speaking urgently into her radio, at the SWAT team, who were probably planning some kind of assault that might or might not save my family. Then I looked at my daughter's face through the window, and I made my choice. "Channel 7, I called to the nearest reporter. "I have a statement to make." The cameras rolled as I stood on Patricia's front porch, looking directly into the lens of Channel 7's main camera. Behind me, I could feel Patricia watching through the front window. Beside her, Melissa held Lily close. "My name is Daniel Thompson," I began. "I'm here to tell you the truth about what happened to my daughter." The reporter, a young woman named Jessica Chen, held her microphone toward me. "Mr. Thompson, are you here voluntarily?" "I'm here because my daughter's life depends on it." I took a breath and began the lie that might save Lily's life. Patricia Williams is innocent. I planted the sodium azide in her cookies because I wanted to destroy her relationship with my family. I've always resented her closeness to my wife and daughter, and I saw an opportunity to frame her for something terrible. The words tasted like poison in my mouth. Around me, I could hear the murmur of the crowd. Police officers, neighbors, reporters, all watching me destroy my own credibility to save my child. "I work at a hospital pharmacy," I continued. "I had access to sodium azide. I put it in Patricia's cookies and then pretended to discover it at work. I manipulated the situation to make her look guilty." Behind me, I heard the front door open. Patricia stepped out onto the porch, still holding her teacup. "Thank you, Daniel," she said, loud enough for the cameras to pick up. "I knew you'd do the right thing eventually." "Now let them go," I said quietly. "Of course, dear. A deal is a deal." But something in her eyes told me she was lying. She'd gotten what she wanted, a public confession that would muddy the waters of any future prosecution. But she wasn't going to let Lily go. She couldn't. My daughter had seen too much, knew too much. Patricia was going to eliminate her anyway. "Actually," Patricia said, raising her voice for the cameras, "I think we need to discuss this further. Inside, all of us." She was inviting me into the house, into her trap. I looked back at Detective Foster, who was frantically shaking her head, at the SWAT commander, who was speaking into his headset, at the reporters, who were capturing every moment of this nightmare for the evening news. Then I looked at Patricia's face and saw the truth there. She'd never intended to let anyone go. This had always been about one thing, adding 3 more sufferers to her collection. "No," I said. Patricia's grandmother's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" I said no. "I've given you your confession. Now let my family go." "Daniel, I think you misunderstood. I understand perfectly." I turned to face the cameras directly. "Patricia Williams is a serial butcher. She's homicided at least 6 children over the past 60 years, including 3 of her own grandchildren. She learned how to do it from her grandmother, who learned it from her grandmother. It's a family tradition of homicide that goes back generations." The crowd erupted. Patricia's face went white with rage. "You lying bastard!" And suddenly the sweet grandmother mask was completely gone. "You have no idea what you've done." She turned and rushed back into the house. I heard Melissa scream. I heard Lily crying, and then I heard the SWAT team's flashbang grenades going off. The front windows of Patricia's house exploded outward as the SWAT team breached from 3 directions simultaneously. Flashbangs detonated in sequence, turning the gray morning into a strobing nightmare of light and sound. I was thrown backward off the porch by the concussion wave, landing hard on Patricia's dead flower garden. Through the ringing in my ears, I could hear shouting, boots on hardwood floors, more breaking glass. "Lily!" I screamed, struggling to my feet. Detective Foster appeared beside me. her hand on my shoulder. Stay back, let them work. But staying back was impossible when my daughter was somewhere in that chaos. I pushed past Detective Foster and ran toward the front door just as a SWAT officer emerged, carrying Lily in his arms. Daddy! She reached for me, and I took her from the officer, holding her so tightly I was probably hurting her. She was crying, but alert, no obvious injuries. Are you okay, baby? Are you hurt? Grandma was being mean, Lily sobbed into my neck. She said I had to drink the tea, but I didn't want to. Another SWAT officer brought Melissa out. She was shaking, her face pale, but she seemed physically unharmed. Where's Patricia? Detective Foster asked. Kitchen, the officer replied grimly. You're going to want to see this. I handed Lily to Melissa and followed Detective Foster into the house. The parlor was destroyed, overturned furniture, broken china, scorch marks on the wallpaper from the flashbangs. We made our way to the kitchen, where Patricia sat calmly at her small breakfast table. She'd prepared 3 cups of tea. One was empty, presumably hers. The other 2 sat untouched, steam still rising from their surfaces. Patricia herself was slumped forward slightly, her eyes closed, a peaceful expression on her face. She's dead, the SWAT medic confirmed. Looks like she drank her own poison. On the table beside the teacups was a handwritten note in Patricia's careful script. The recipe dies with me. Some traditions are too precious to share. Detective Foster bagged the note as evidence. She knew it was over. Decided to go out on her own terms. I stared at Patricia's body, this woman who'd terrorized my family, who'd homicided children for 60 years. She looked exactly like what she'd always appeared to be, a harmless elderly woman who might have baked cookies for church fundraisers. Daniel? Melissa appeared in the doorway, still holding Lily. Is she? She's dead. Melissa's legs gave out. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, Lily still in her arms, and began to cry. Not the gentle tears of grief, but the harsh, ugly sobs of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. I'm sorry, she whispered. God, Daniel, I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. I chose her over you, over Lily. How do I live with that? I knelt beside her chair and put my arms around both of them. My wife and my daughter, my family somehow still intact despite everything. We'll figure it out, I said. We'll figure it all out. But even as I said the words, I wondered if that was true. How do you rebuild trust after something like this? How do you forgive someone for choosing a serial butcher over their own family? How do you forget that your mother-in-law tried to homicide your child with a chocolate chip cookie? The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of police interviews, media attention, and forensic discoveries that made Patricia's crimes even more horrific than we'd initially imagined. Detective Foster called me on a Thursday afternoon with the latest findings. Daniel, we've been through Patricia's house top to bottom. You need to know what we found. I was sitting in my living room, watching Lily color in her princess coloring book. She'd been staying home from school since the hostage situation, too afraid to leave my sight. The child psychologist said it was normal, that she'd need time to feel safe again. What did you find? A journal. Patricia kept detailed records going back 40 years. Every child she eliminated, every method she used, every family she destroyed. She documented it all like she was keeping a recipe collection. My stomach turned. How many? 16 children. That we can confirm, there might be more. 16. The number hit me like a physical blow. 16 families who'd lost children to Patricia's twisted family tradition. 16 funerals where grieving parents had never known the truth. There's more, Detective Foster continued. We found correspondence with other women, letters, emails. Patricia wasn't working alone. What do you mean? She was part of a network. Women who'd learned the same techniques, probably from their own mothers or grandmothers. They shared information, methods, even sufferers sometimes. The scope of it was staggering. A generational conspiracy of child homicide, hidden behind the facade of loving grandmothers and devoted mothers. How far does it go? We're still investigating. But Daniel, we've identified at least 12 other women in 6 states who were corresponding with Patricia. The FBI is taking over the case. After she hung up, I sat in my living room watching my daughter color and tried to process what I'd just learned. Patricia hadn't been an isolated monster. She'd been part of something larger, older, more systematic. How many other families were living this nightmare right now? How many other children were in danger from women who looked like perfect grandmothers? Melissa appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. She'd been staying at her friend Taylor's apartment since the hostage situation, coming by every day to see Lily, but not ready to move back home yet. "That was Detective Foster?" she asked, settling into the chair across from me. "They found Patricia's journal. 16 children, Melissa. She eliminated 16 children over 40 years. Melissa's face went white. She set her coffee down with shaking hands. "I lived with her," she whispered. "I brought Lily to visit her every week. I left my daughter alone with a serial butcher. You didn't know." "I should have known. The signs were there. Lily's stomach aches after visits. The way Mom always insisted on making special treats just for her. The stories she told about children who died in accidents." Melissa buried her face in her hands. "What kind of mother am I? The kind who was manipulated by an expert. Patricia fooled everyone, Melissa. Police, doctors, social workers. She'd been perfecting her act for 60 years. But I could see that my words weren't reaching her. Melissa was drowning in guilt, and I wasn't sure how to throw her a lifeline. Especially when part of me was still angry about her initial refusal to believe me, her willingness to put her mother's feelings above Lily's safety. "I want to come home," she said quietly. "I want that too. But we need counseling. All of us. We need to work through this properly. I know, I've already made appointments with Dr. Martinez, family therapy, starting next week." I looked at Lily, still absorbed in her coloring. She was drawing a house with a big front door and flowers in the yard. A normal house. A safe house. "She's going to be okay," I said, as much to convince myself as Melissa. "How can you be sure?" "Because she's strong, because she's got parents who love her, and because she's never going to eat another homemade cookie from anyone we don't trust completely." Melissa almost smiled at that. Almost. "Daniel, there's something else. Something I need to tell you." The tone of her voice made me look up from Lily's drawing. "What?" "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Another child. Another potential sufferer for someone like Patricia. Another life to protect in a world where grandmothers could be serial butchers. "How long have you known?" 2 weeks. I found out the day before Mom brought the cookies. I thought about that timing, about Patricia's uncanny ability to sense when families were vulnerable, when new children might be entering her sphere of influence. "Do you think she knew?" "I don't know, maybe. She always seemed to have a sixth sense about family changes." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Patricia hadn't just been trying to eliminate Lily. She'd been clearing the way for a new sufferer, a baby who would be completely dependent, completely vulnerable. A fresh start for her twisted family tradition. "We're going to be okay," I said, reaching across the space between our chairs to take Melissa's hand. "All of us. We're going to be okay." But even as I said it, I wondered how many other families Patricia's network was targeting right now. How many other children were in danger from women who baked cookies and told bedtime stories and planned homicide with equal skill. The investigation was just beginning. 6 months later, I was testifying before a congressional subcommittee on domestic terrorism. The hearing room was packed with reporters, FBI agents, and families who'd lost children to what the media had dubbed the Grandmother Network. "Mr. Thompson," the committee chairwoman said, "can you describe for the record what your family experienced?" I looked out at the audience and saw faces I'd come to know over the past months. Sarah Chen, whose 4-year-old son had died after eating cupcakes from his grandmother. Michael Rodriguez, whose daughter had been poisoned by her great-aunt's special recipe cookies. Dozens of families, all connected by the same horrific thread. My mother-in-law, Patricia Williams, attempted to homicide my 6-year-old daughter with cookies laced with sodium azide, I began. We later learned that this was part of a systematic pattern of child homicide that had been operating for at least 4 generations. The FBI had traced Patricia's network back to the 1920s, when her great-grandmother had begun what she called selective family planning. The technique had been passed down through letters, personal visits, and eventually email and encrypted messaging apps. The perpetrators specifically targeted children between the ages of 4 and 8, I continued, old enough to be independent, young enough to be trusting. They used baked goods as delivery systems because children associate cookies and cakes with love and safety. Agent Sarah Martinez, the FBI's lead investigator on the case, had explained it to me during one of our interviews. These women weren't insane in any clinical sense. They were coldly rational, methodical, and patient. They eliminated children not out of rage or psychosis, but because they enjoyed the attention and sympathy that came with being a grieving grandmother. How many children were victimized by this network? The chairwoman asked. The FBI has confirmed 87 ends across 12 states over the past 40 years. But we believe the actual number is much higher. 87 children. The number still made me physically sick. 87 families destroyed by women who looked like everyone's ideal grandmother. And your daughter? How is she doing now? Lily is 7 years old and in second grade. She's healthy, happy, and has no memory of the poisoning attempt. We've been very careful to shield her from the media coverage and legal proceedings. That wasn't entirely true. Lily did have nightmares sometimes, and she refused to eat anything that came from someone she didn't know personally. But she was resilient in the way that children are, adapting to her new reality with remarkable grace. Mr. Thompson, what would you say to other parents who might be concerned about similar threats in their own families? I'd been asked this question dozens of times over the past months, and my answer was always the same. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't let family loyalty or social pressure override your parental protective instincts. And never, ever leave your children alone with someone who insists on feeding them special treats that only they prepare. After the hearing, I stood in the hallway outside the committee room, surrounded by other parents who'd lost children to the network. We'd become an unlikely family, bonded by shared trauma, and the determination to make sure this never happened to anyone else. Any word on the prosecutions? Asked Sarah Chen. 12 women indicted so far, I replied. 3 in custody, 9 still at large. The FBI thinks some of them have fled the country. What about the recipes themselves, the actual methods they used? Agent Martinez had briefed us on this the week before. The network had developed increasingly sophisticated techniques over the decades, moving beyond simple poisons to methods that mimicked natural diseases and accidents. They're all being classified, I said. The Justice Department doesn't want to risk copycat crimes. Good, said Michael Rodriguez grimly. Some knowledge should die with the people who created it. I thought about Patricia's final note. The recipe dies with me. Some traditions are too precious to share. She'd been wrong, of course. The FBI had recovered detailed instructions from her house, along with correspondence that revealed the full scope of the network. But in a way, she'd been right about one thing. This was a tradition, a twisted, evil tradition that had been passed down through generations of women who'd learned to see child homicide as an acceptable family practice. Daniel? Sarah Chen touched my arm. Are you okay? Just thinking about how many we didn't save. You can't think about it that way. You exposed them. You broke the network. Because of what you did, dozens of other children are alive today. I knew she was right, but it didn't make the guilt any easier to bear. If I'd been more suspicious earlier, if I'd trusted my instincts about Patricia sooner, maybe some of those 87 children would still be alive. The important thing, said Michael Rodriguez, is that it's over. The network is broken. The tradition dies here. I hoped he was right, but late at night when I checked on Lily sleeping peacefully in her bed, I sometimes wondered if we'd really found all of them. If somewhere out there, another grandmother was baking cookies for another unsuspecting grandchild. Some traditions, I'd learned, are harder to eliminate than others. The trial of Margaret Holloway, Patricia's closest associate in the network, began on a cold February morning 8 months after Lily's poisoning. I sat in the gallery with Melissa, watching the prosecution present evidence that would have seemed impossible to believe a year earlier. Margaret was 71 years old, a retired librarian who'd volunteered at children's hospitals for 30 years. She looked exactly like the kind of grandmother you'd want reading stories to your children, which, the prosecution argued, was precisely the point. Mrs. Holloway corresponded with Patricia Williams for over 20 years. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh told the jury. They shared methods, compared sufferers, and celebrated each other's successes. In their correspondence, they referred to homicided children as completed projects. The evidence was overwhelming. Email chains discussing the most effective dosages of various poisons. Photographs of children who died shared between network members like trading cards. A point system they developed to rank their eliminates based on factors like the child's age, the method used, and how long they'd evaded suspicion. The defendant personally homicided 7 children between 2005 and 2018, A.D. Walsh continued. She specifically targeted grandchildren of her friends and neighbors, offering to babysit or provide special treats. She kept souvenirs from each sufferer, locks of hair, favorite toys, photographs taken shortly before their passings. I watched Margaret's face as the prosecutor spoke. She showed no emotion, no remorse, no recognition that she was being described as one of the most prolific child butchers in American history. She might have been listening to someone read the weather report. Your Honor, Margaret's defense attorney said during his opening statement, my client is a 71-year-old woman with no prior criminal record. The prosecution's case is based entirely on circumstantial evidence and the ravings of a dead woman who was clearly mentally ill. But the evidence wasn't circumstantial. The FBI had recovered Margaret's computer, her correspondence, even a journal where she'd rated her sufferer's final moments on a scale of 1 to 10. She wrote about 4-year-old Emma Patterson, ADA Walsh read from the journal during her closing argument. Emma struggled more than expected, very satisfying. She called for her mother at the end, 8 out of 10. Several jurors looked physically sick. One woman was crying openly. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Margaret showed no reaction to the verdict. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, looking like someone's beloved grandmother who'd just been told dinner was ready. Outside the courthouse, I was surrounded by reporters asking for my reaction. Justice has been served, I said, but it doesn't bring back the children she homicided. It doesn't undo the damage she caused to dozens of families. Mr. Thompson, do you believe there are other networks like this operating? I think there are hunters everywhere, and they don't always look like what we expect. The most important thing parents can do is trust their instincts and never assume that someone is safe just because they look harmless. That evening, Melissa and I sat in our living room while Lily played with her dolls on the carpet. She was 8 now, taller, more confident, but still cautious around strangers. Still suspicious of homemade treats from anyone outside our immediate family. Do you think it's really over? Melissa asked. The network? Probably. The FBI arrested or identified most of the active members, but not all of them. No, not all of them. 3 women from Patricia's network were still at large. The FBI believed they'd fled to countries without extradition treaties, where they were probably starting new lives under new identities. Other children in other countries might be in danger. I still have nightmares, Melissa said quietly. About Patricia? About all of it. About how close we came to losing Lily. About how I almost chose my mother over my own family. We'd been through months of counseling, both individual and family therapy. Dr. Martinez had helped us work through the trauma, the guilt, the anger, but some wounds, I'd learned, never completely heal. You were manipulated by an expert, I said. Patricia had 60 years of practice making herself seem innocent. I know that intellectually, but emotionally, Melissa shook her head. I chose her over you, over Lily. How do I forgive myself for that? The same way I forgive myself for not seeing the signs earlier. The same way we all learned to live with the choices we made when we didn't have all the information. Our second daughter, Emma, was born 3 months after Margaret's conviction. We'd chosen the name carefully, not after any of Patricia's sufferers, but because it meant whole or universal, a fresh start for our family. Emma was now 6 months old, a happy, healthy baby who would grow up never knowing her grandmother, never eating homemade cookies from anyone we didn't trust completely, never learning that some traditions are too dangerous to continue. Daddy? Lily looked up from her dolls. Can we have cookies for dessert? Store-bought cookies, I said, from a package. With lots of preservatives and artificial ingredients, Melissa added with a smile. Yay! Lily cheered. And for a moment, our living room felt like any other family's. Normal, safe, whole. But I knew that somewhere out there, other families were still in danger. Other grandmothers were still baking special recipes for unsuspecting grandchildren. Some traditions die hard. Others don't die at all. 2 years after Patricia's end, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a single chocolate chip cookie wrapped in plastic, along with a note written in careful cursive handwriting. The tradition continues. Your family was lucky. Others won't be. Sweet dreams, Daniel. I called Detective Foster immediately. She'd been promoted to lieutenant and was now heading the FBI's task force on domestic child endangerment networks. We'll trace it, she said after I'd read her the note. But Daniel, this was probably just someone trying to scare you. A copycat, or maybe a relative of one of the women we arrested. Maybe. But I didn't believe that, and neither did she. The cookie looked exactly like Patricia's recipe. The handwriting was similar to Margaret Holloway's, but not identical. Someone else. Someone we hadn't caught. What do you want to do? Detective Foster asked. I want to find them. Daniel, they're still out there, still eliminating children, and they just threatened my family. That evening, I sat Melissa down and showed her the package. She went pale, then angry, then determined. What do? We fight back. Over the next 6 months, I worked with the FBI to set up a foundation dedicated to identifying and stopping child endangerment networks. We called it the Lily Foundation, and our mission was simple: protect children from hunters who hide behind facades of love and family tradition. We developed educational programs for parents, training materials for law enforcement, and a database of warning signs that might indicate systematic child abuse. We worked with international agencies to track down the 3 women from Patricia's network who'd fled the country. We found 2 of them. Margaret's sister Ruth was living in Costa Rica under an assumed name. She'd been working as a nanny for wealthy American expatriate families. When Costa Rican police raided her apartment, they found detailed plans for poisoning 4 children in her care. Patricia's cousin Linda had fled to Thailand, where she'd been volunteering at an orphanage in Bangkok. The Thai authorities found sodium azide hidden in her quarters, along with a list of children she'd identified as suitable candidates. Both women were extradited and convicted. Both received life sentences without parole. The third woman, Patricia's former neighbor Helen Morrison, was never found. She'd disappeared completely, leaving behind only an empty house and a computer hard drive that had been professionally wiped. She's probably dead, Detective Foster told me during one of our regular briefings. These women don't typically survive long on the run. They need the social structure, the access to sufferers. Or she's found a new hunting ground. Possibly. But Daniel, you can't spend your life chasing ghosts. She was right, but I couldn't let it go. Somewhere out there, Helen Morrison might be baking cookies for another unsuspecting family. Another grandmother with a secret recipe and a taste for children's suffering. The Lily Foundation grew rapidly. Within 2 years, we had chapters in 12 states and partnerships with law enforcement agencies across the country. We'd helped identify and stop 4 other potential child endangerment cases, including one grandmother who'd been slowly poisoning her grandson with antifreeze mixed into his breakfast cereal. You're making a difference, Dr. Martinez told me during one of our sessions. You've turned your trauma into something positive. It doesn't feel like enough. It never will. But you can't save every child, Daniel. You can only save the ones you can save. On Lily's 10th birthday, we had a party in our backyard. Store-bought cake, factory-made ice cream, and friends from school whose parents we'd carefully vetted. Normal childhood fun with layers of security that most families never had to consider. Daddy, Lily said as I was cleaning up after the party, why don't I have a grandmother like my friends do? It was a question I'd been dreading for years. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that her grandmother tried to homicide her? How do you tell a child that some family traditions are deadly? Your grandmother was sick, I said carefully. She did things that hurt people, including you. That's why she's not part of our family anymore. Is that why you and Mommy are always so careful about food? Yes. We want to make sure you're safe. Lily considered this for a moment. Are there other sick grandmothers? Some, but there are people working very hard to find them and stop them. Like you? Like me? She nodded solemnly, then brightened. Can I help when I'm older? If you want to. I want to. I want to help protect other kids. That night, after Lily and Emma were asleep, Melissa and I sat on our back porch, drinking wine and watching the stars. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Getting involved with the foundation and spending so much time on this? No, do you? Sometimes. I worry that we're letting what happened to us define our entire lives. It did define our lives. We can either let that destroy us, or we can use it to protect other families. I know, and I'm proud of what you've built. It's just, sometimes I wish we could just be normal. We'll never be normal, Melissa. Normal families don't have to worry about whether their relatives are serial butchers. Normal children don't get poisoned by their grandmothers. But we can be happy. We can be safe. and we can make sure other families have the same chance. 3 months later, I received another package. This time, there was no cookie, just a newspaper clipping from a small town in Oregon reporting the sudden end of a 6-year-old girl named Sophie Chen. The cause of end was listed as accidental poisoning from household chemicals. At the bottom of the clipping, someone had written in the same careful cursive, "The tradition continues." I called Detective Foster immediately. "We'll look into it," she promised. "But Daniel, this could be anyone, someone who read about the network in the news and wants to scare you. Or it could be Helen Morrison. Maybe. We'll check it out." 2 weeks later, Detective Foster called me back. Sophie Chen was poisoned with sodium azide, same signature as Patricia's sufferers. And get this, the family had recently hired a new babysitter, an elderly woman who said her name was Helen Miller. Morrison using an alias? That's what we think. Local police are investigating, but she's disappeared again. Left the apartment she was renting, abandoned her car, gone. So Helen Morrison was still out there, still eliminating children, still carrying on Patricia's twisted tradition. What now? I asked. Now we keep hunting. And that's exactly what we did. The Lilly Foundation expanded its mission to include active investigation and tracking of suspected child hunters. We worked with international law enforcement, developed new detection methods, and created a network of parents and professionals dedicated to protecting children from monsters who looked like loving grandmothers. We never found Helen Morrison, but we found others. A retired teacher in Michigan who'd been poisoning students' birthday treats. A volunteer at a children's hospital in Texas who'd been injecting sodium azide into IV bags. A foster grandmother in Florida who'd eliminated 3 children over 5 years and was working on her 4th. Each arrest felt like a victory. Each saved child felt like redemption. But late at night, when I checked on my own daughters sleeping peacefully in their beds, I sometimes wondered how many we hadn't found yet. How many Helen Morrisons were still out there, baking cookies and planning homicide? Some traditions, I'd learned, are almost impossible to eliminate, but that doesn't mean you stop fighting them. On Lily's 12th birthday, she asked if she could volunteer at the foundation. "I want to help protect other kids," she said, "like you and Mommy do." "You're too young for the serious work," I told her. "But maybe you could help with the educational programs. Teach other children about staying safe. I'd like that." So Lily became the youngest volunteer in the Lilly Foundation's history, helping to develop safety programs for elementary school children. She taught other kids to be cautious about accepting food from strangers, to trust their instincts when something felt wrong, and to always tell a trusted adult if someone made them uncomfortable. "I'm proud of you," I told her after her first presentation to a group of second graders. "I'm proud of us," she replied. "We turned something terrible into something good." She was right. We had turned our family's nightmare into a force for protecting other families. We'd taken Patricia's legacy of death and transformed it into a legacy of life. But the fight wasn't over. It might never be over. Because somewhere out there, Helen Morrison was still baking cookies. And somewhere else, another grandmother was learning the family recipe.